Barron Trump was known for his quiet demeanor and a heart full of compassion. Despite growing up in a world of privilege, he had an innate ability to see people for who they were, not what they had. This story takes us to a crisp autumn morning, a time when the world seemed to hum with the promise of the season's change. But for one old man named Walter, life had been stagnant, stuck in a place of despair and longing. Walter lived in a small, worn-down house on the outskirts of town. His home, much like his spirit, had weathered decades of storms. Peeling paint, cracked windows, and a sagging roof were just the beginning. Inside, the walls carried memories of a life once vibrant, but now shadowed by the loss of his wife and children who had moved far away. The old man spent his days sitting on the porch, staring out into the distance, as though searching for something he couldn't quite name. Barron had taken a liking to long drives through the countryside, finding solace in the quiet roads and open skies. That morning, as he drove by Walter's house, something compelled him to stop. Perhaps it was the way the sunlight caught the frail figure on the porch, or the eerie silence that surrounded the dilapidated home. Whatever it was, Barron felt an undeniable pull. As he approached, Walter looked up, his weary eyes meeting Barron's curious ones. "Good morning," Barron said, offering a warm smile. Walter hesitated before nodding. "Morning. I couldn't help but notice your house. It's seen better days, hasn't it?" Barron's tone was gentle, not mocking. Walter chuckled, a sound more hollow than joyful. "That's putting it kindly. This old place is barely standing." Barron sat down on the porch steps, unbothered by the peeling paint beneath him. "Why don't you fix it up?" Walter sighed deeply. "Son, if I had the money, the strength, or even the will, I would have done it years ago. But it's just me now. And truth be told, I've made peace with it. This house and I, we're falling apart together." Barron felt a pang of sadness. Here was a man who had given up, not out of choice, but because life had left him with little else to hold on to. Yet, despite his own struggles, Walter had a quiet dignity about him that struck Barron. "Well," Barron said, standing up and brushing off his hands, "maybe it's time for someone to give you a hand." Walter frowned. "What do you mean?" "You'll see," Barron said with a wink before heading back to his car. The following week, Walter woke up to the sound of trucks pulling into his driveway. He shuffled outside, his jaw dropping at the sight of materials being unloaded and people bustling around. At the center of it all was Barron, wearing a work jacket and a determined expression. "What on earth is all this?" Walter asked, bewildered. Barron grinned. "This, Walter, is the start of something new. We're going to rebuild your home." Walter was speechless. "But why? You don't even know me." "I don't have to," Barron replied. "Sometimes helping someone isn't about knowing them. It's about knowing they deserve it." "I don't have to," Barron replied. "Sometimes helping someone isn't about knowing them. It's about knowing they deserve it." Walter looked at him, still processing the weight of Barron's words. It was rare to find someone with that kind of generosity, someone who didn't hesitate to extend a hand, no matter how little they knew the person in need. It made him wonder how many people were out there, willing to help, if only they knew how much it mattered. The days that followed were a blur of hard work, laughter, and small moments of connection. Barron continued showing up every day, bringing with him not just his work ethic, but a quiet optimism that was contagious. His presence lifted the spirits of everyone who worked on the house, and Walter found himself looking forward to the sound of the trucks pulling up each morning. It was no longer just about the repairs, it was about the camaraderie, the sense that for the first time in years, he was part of something bigger. One afternoon, as they took a break from the heavy lifting, Barron sat on the porch, sipping lemonade and watching Walter as he carefully tended to the small garden that had been neglected for so long. Flowers were beginning to bloom, and the air was thick with the scent of freshly turned soil. It was the first time in a long time that Walter had smiled genuinely without a hint of sadness behind it. "You know," Walter said, wiping his hands on his shirt, "I haven't really taken care of this place in years. It used to be my wife's pride and joy. She was the one who made everything grow, kept everything neat. I just let it wither after she passed." Barron nodded, understanding more than Walter could imagine. He too had lost people in his life who had shaped him, people who had left voids that couldn't be filled. And yet, he had learned that healing didn't happen in isolation. It happened through action, through community, and through the love we still had to give, even when we thought it was gone. "You've got a green thumb, Walter," Barron said with a smile. "She'd be proud to see how much you've done." Walter glanced over at him, his eyes softening. "I've never thought about it that way. I guess I've been too caught up in what's missing, rather than what I still have." Barron sat in silence for a moment, watching the old man work. His hands, weathered by years of labor, moved with a grace that belied his age. And though he had never seen his wife's love for the garden, Barron could sense it in the way Walter cared for the plants, as though he were tending to her memory with each bloom. After a long day of work, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Barron made his way to the garden where Walter had been working earlier. He stood beside him for a moment, taking in the sight of the newly planted flowers and the stillness of the air. For the first time, the house looked less like a burden and more like a home. The pride in Walter's voice had returned, and Barron knew that it wasn't just the house that was being rebuilt. It was Walter himself. "Walter, I know we've only known each other for a short time," Barron said quietly, "but I want you to know something. You've inspired me. To see you take something broken and make it beautiful again. It's incredible. I think it's easy to forget how powerful we are, even when we feel small." Walter turned to face Barron, his expression one of surprise. "Inspire you? I'm just an old man trying to put his life back together." Barron smiled gently. "Exactly. You've taught me that it's not about what we've lost. It's about what we still have to give. And I think you've got a lot of love to give, Walter." For the first time in a long while, Walter's eyes glistened. He cleared his throat, his voice thick with emotion. "I've spent so much time thinking I was too old, too broken, too late for anything to change. But seeing this place, seeing everything you've done, I guess maybe it's not too late for me after all." Barron placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's never too late, Walter. The only thing standing in your way is believing that you're done. But you're not. Not yet." The two stood together in the soft evening light, a profound silence hanging between them. The weight of everything Walter had lost was still there, but so too was the hope of what could be gained. And in that moment, Barron realized that sometimes the most powerful thing we can offer someone isn't money or things. It's belief in them when they've forgotten how to believe in themselves. The breeze was light, and the sun was beginning its slow descent beneath the horizon, casting the world in a golden glow. Walter, despite his years and the weight of his hardships, stood taller now. His hands, worn from years of hard work, rested on the edge of the porch as he gazed out at the garden they'd cultivated together. He could feel the transformation in himself, both inside and out, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he could see the beauty of his life. His eyes were clear, no longer clouded by the burden of grief, and his posture straightened with a renewed sense of purpose. Barron stood beside him, watching as the world seemed to fall into a peaceful rhythm. It wasn't just the house that had been rebuilt, it was Walter's spirit. The house was more than just walls and a roof now. It was a place of healing, of restoration, of memories being made. And for Barron, who had come into Walter's life almost by accident, It was a reminder of the power of small acts of kindness. He had given Walter something far more valuable than money. He had given him hope. The days that followed were filled with moments of quiet reflection. Walter's children visited regularly, their eyes wide with amazement as they walked through the house, taking in every detail of the transformation. They couldn't stop praising their father for the strength he had shown, for the resilience he had demonstrated in bringing his home and his life back from the brink. And though Walter never once claimed all the credit, Barron knew the truth. It had been Walter's courage, his ability to keep going, that had truly turned everything around. Barron had simply provided the spark. "Dad, this place is amazing," one of his daughters said one afternoon as she and her family walked through the front door. "I don't even recognize it anymore. It's like a whole new world in here." Walter smiled, his hands wrinkling with age but strong with determination. "It's not just the house that's changed," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "It's me. I'm not the man I used to be. I've learned a lot from all this, and I'm thankful for it." His daughter looked at him with a mix of wonder and admiration. "I'm proud of you, Dad. I never thought I'd see this day." Walter glanced at Barron, who stood nearby, his presence as steady and reassuring as always. "I'm proud of myself too," Walter said, his voice breaking slightly. "And I'm proud of this guy right here." Barron shrugged modestly, his trademark humility shining through. "You did all the hard work, Walter. I just helped you get there." But it was clear to everyone in that room that Barron's influence had been more than just a helping hand. It had been a guiding light, one that had shown Walter the way when the path ahead had seemed so dark and uncertain. Over the following weeks, Walter began to rebuild not only his home, but his relationships with his family. His children came by more often, helping with the finishing touches on the house and spending time in the newly renovated garden. They worked together as a family, planting flowers, fixing small repairs, and reconnecting in a way that had seemed impossible just months earlier. The rift that had once separated them began to heal, stitch by stitch, as they shared memories, laughter, and love. The house became a place of gathering for Walter's extended family, too. Relatives who hadn't visited in years came by to see the transformation, and each time, Walter felt a little more of the weight lift from his shoulders. The love that had been lost, the connections that had frayed over the years, slowly began to return. And for Barron, watching it all unfold was like witnessing a miracle. One he hadn't expected, but one that filled him with a deep sense of fulfillment. It wasn't just the family who saw the change in Walter. The neighbors, who had once looked on with pity or indifference, began to take notice. The house, which had once been a shadow of neglect, was now a beacon of hope and resilience. They saw Walter, no longer the broken man they had once known, but a man who had found his strength again. One afternoon, as Barron was preparing to leave the house after another day of working alongside Walter, one of the neighbors stopped by to speak with him. The man was older, with a weathered face and a kind demeanor. "You've done something special here, son," the neighbor said, his voice gravelly with age. "Walter, he was a lost soul for a long time. I thought we'd never see him come back from it. But you gave him something. Not just this house, but something deeper. You gave him hope." Barron nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "It wasn't just me," he said softly. "It was Walter's determination, his willingness to keep going, even when it seemed impossible." The neighbor smiled, placing a hand on Barron's shoulder. "I know that. But sometimes, all it takes is someone else believing in you. And that's what you did for him. You showed him that he was worth saving." Barron didn't know how to respond. He wasn't used to receiving praise for what had been such a personal, meaningful experience. But in that moment, he understood something deep within himself. The smallest acts of kindness, the ones that seem insignificant to the outside world, can often be the ones that change everything. As the months went by, Walter's life continued to blossom. His health improved as he worked in the garden and around the house. His family grew closer, and they began making new memories together. Memories that would last long after the paint had dried and the renovations were complete. Walter's heart, once heavy with grief, was now light with gratitude. One day, as Barron visited Walter to check on the final details of the project, Walter invited him to sit in the garden. The old man had a proud gleam in his eye as he looked out at the flowers and vegetables that now thrived there. It was more than just a garden. It was a testament to the love and care that had been poured into it. "Thank you, Barron," Walter said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't think I can ever repay you for everything you've done, but I hope you know that what you've done for me, it's changed everything. You've given me a new chance at life." Barron smiled, the warmth of his words matching the glow of the setting sun. "You don't need to repay me, Walter. You've done the hardest part. You believed in yourself again, and that's all it takes." Walter chuckled softly, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I never would have believed in myself without you, Barron. You showed me that it's never too late to start over." And Barron realized then that the journey wasn't just about repairing a house. It was about rebuilding a life, one act of kindness at a time. As the years passed, Walter's home remained a symbol of resilience and hope. It was a place where the past was honored, but the future was embraced. And whenever Barron returned to visit, he was always greeted with a smile, a handshake, and a heartfelt "thank you." The transformation of Walter's life had been nothing short of miraculous. But it wasn't just Walter who had been changed. Barron had been changed too. He had learned the true meaning of compassion, the kind that didn't expect anything in return, but gave everything without hesitation. He had seen firsthand how the smallest gestures could have the most profound impact. And as Barron left the house for the last time, walking down the path that had once seemed so dark, he knew that he had been part of something extraordinary. He had been part of a story that would live on, not just in the walls of the house, but in the hearts of the people whose lives he had touched. Walter's home, rebuilt and full of life, stood as a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of the human spirit, and the unbreakable bond that forms when people reach out to one another, no matter how impossible the circumstances may seem. And so, Barron Trump's quiet act of kindness, one that started with a simple offer to help, became a story that would warm hearts for years to come. A reminder that in a world often filled with uncertainty, love and compassion could still change everything. And so, the story of Barron Trump and Walter's journey is a testament to the incredible power of kindness, compassion, and the human spirit. It's a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there's always a spark of hope waiting to be ignited. What started as an act of generosity blossomed into something far more profound. A transformation not just of a house, but of lives, hearts, and futures. Barron's belief in Walter and Walter's belief in himself proves that it's never too late to start over. So remember, the smallest act of kindness can change someone's world. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Let's continue spreading the message that kindness is the force that can rebuild lives, one small gesture at a time. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.